Welcome to our channel. We're so excited to have you here. In today's story, we're diving into an unforgettable moment where tradition, discipline, and respect are put to the test. But before we get started, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy our stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful tale we'll be sharing tomorrow. Get ready for an amazing journey that will leave you thinking long after it ends. You won't believe how this royal guard handled the worst prank ever. It was a scorching summer day, the kind that makes you long for the shade and a cool breeze. The temperature had reached a punishing 95 degrees by midday, and the streets of Washington, D.C. seemed to shimmer under the intensity of the sun. People wandered the city, seeking any shelter they could find. Water bottles sold out quickly at local shops, and makeshift paper fans fluttered through the crowd like nervous butterflies. Amidst the blistering heat stood U.S. Army Honor Guard Daniel Evans, stationed at his post at the National Mall, a symbol of unwavering discipline and stoicism. Though the heat radiated from the stone pavement, causing his ceremonial uniform to feel as if it were made of fire, Daniel stood tall, his posture impeccable. His white gloves, polished rifle, and the heavy black bearskin hat perched atop his head weighed down on him, trapping the heat against his scalp. Yet, despite the sweltering conditions, he didn't flinch. He didn't even sweat more than was absolutely necessary. His discipline was unbreakable, a quality that had earned him this highly coveted position. But what many tourists passing by didn't realize was that being an honor guard wasn't just about physical endurance. The selection process was grueling, involving not only top-tier military training, but also a psychological evaluation to test candidates' ability to withstand the harshest conditions: physical discomfort, intense provocation, and the constant attention from thousands of onlookers. Daniel had scored in the highest percentile in mental resilience, which is why he was there, in the blazing heat, performing his duties without a single complaint. Meanwhile, a few yards away, a man named Jake Miller, an influencer from California, stood with his girlfriend Laura, clearly frustrated. Jake, 29, had built a massive following on social media with his fitness challenges, stunts, and viral content. But in the past year, his follower count had dwindled dramatically. His brand had lost its sparkle, and sponsorships had dried up. What was once a path to fame now felt like a downward spiral. "Can we just get one more shot?" Jake muttered under his breath, adjusting the angle of his camera. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and glanced at his phone again, analyzing the image. "It's just not perfect. The lighting's off. I need more of the guard in the shot." Laura, standing next to him, sighed deeply. She wasn't impressed. They had been stuck in this endless cycle of photo shoots all morning. From one monument to the next, Jake's obsession with capturing the perfect shot for his followers was starting to take its toll. "We've been here for over 20 minutes, Jake," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "There's more to this trip than just photos. We came here to enjoy ourselves, not to stage every moment." Jake didn't seem to hear her. His obsession with perfection was consuming him. He adjusted his pristine white linen shirt and scanned the crowd, feeling the pressure mounting as his follower count continued to slide. "We're here to build my future, Laura," he replied, the tightness in his jaw betraying his anxiety. "You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under. People expect quality content. My career depends on it." Laura's patience was wearing thin. The man she had once admired for his carefree spirit and spontaneity was now just a performer, consumed by the need for constant validation from strangers on the internet. As they approached Daniel's post, Jake couldn't help but notice the calm stoicism of the honor guard, standing still despite the heat, despite the tourists, despite the mounting tension in the air. That's when Jake's mind clicked. His previous frustration morphed into something else: curiosity. "Did you hear that?" he said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the group of tourists gathered around Daniel. "This guy is trained to maintain self-control under pressure. That sounds like a challenge." Laura immediately tugged at his arm, sensing the dangerous shift in Jake's mindset. "No, Jake, please, don't," They're soldiers, not props for your content. But Jake was already fixated. The wheels were turning in his head, his desire for something new, something different, pushing him further. He had to provoke a reaction, a real one, and he was determined to get it. As Jake stood there, calculating the perfect angle for his next photo, a sense of mounting frustration built within him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. His follower count had taken a nosedive recently, and his sponsorship deals were drying up. It felt as if his entire career was slipping through his fingers. The more he tried to regain his footing, the further he seemed to fall. The pressure to remain relevant, to capture the viral moment that would push his brand back into the spotlight, was overwhelming. The social media algorithms had shifted, and Jake's content was no longer cutting it. It wasn't enough to post a simple workout video or a food challenge anymore. People wanted raw, unfiltered moments, authenticity. And that's exactly what Jake was missing. His once spontaneous, genuine moments had become staged, forced. The audience could see it, and they didn't respond to it the same way they had before. Laura could see it too. The tension in his jaw, the way his eyes never left the screen of his phone. She knew that he was struggling, but she also knew that this obsession with getting more likes, more views, was eating away at him. And worse, it was eating away at their relationship. What had once been a carefree trip to Europe had now become an endless series of photo shoots. Every landmark, every meal, every moment had to be captured and perfected for the camera. It was exhausting. "Jake," Laura said, her voice tinged with frustration, "we've been here for hours and you haven't even looked up from that screen. This isn't why we came here. We're supposed to be enjoying this time together. Not just for your followers." But Jake didn't hear her. He couldn't hear her. His mind was already miles away, consumed by his struggle to stay relevant. As he adjusted his camera again, the realization hit him hard. He needed something different, something to break through the noise. He needed something that would get people talking, something that would bring back the attention he had lost. His eyes shifted to Daniel, the honor guard, still standing perfectly still despite the heat, despite the stares. He was the perfect target. Jake's mind began to work, calculating, planning. This wasn't just another photo to add to his feed. No, this could be the moment, the viral moment, the one that would put him back on top. Self-control, Jake murmured to himself, repeating the words he'd overheard from the tour guide. That's what they're trained for. Highest level of self-control. That's a challenge. Laura, standing next to him, knew exactly where his thoughts were going. "Jake, don't. You're taking this too far. They're soldiers, not entertainment. This isn't some game." But Jake was already lost in the idea. He felt a surge of determination. This was his chance to capture something raw, something that no one else had. He watched as tourists crowded around Daniel, posing for pictures and making silly faces. He couldn't help but sneer. They were all doing the same thing, taking the same tired photos. But Jake had a different idea. "I need to shake things up," he muttered, his fingers tapping nervously against his phone. His eyes never left Daniel's unmoving figure. "This is too easy. These people just stand there, but I can make it more authentic." Laura, sensing his growing obsession, grabbed his arm. "Stop it, Jake. This isn't the way to get the engagement you want. You're making a scene. People are starting to notice." Jake barely acknowledged her words. He was fixated, his mind now fully locked on Daniel. His heart raced as he thought about the possibility. What if he could get a real reaction out of the guard? What if he could provoke something, anything, that would make people sit up and take notice? The crowd around them was shifting. The tourists, sensing the tension, began to step back, creating a subtle but noticeable space around Daniel. Jake moved closer, his gaze now fixed on the honor guard's face. He was looking for any sign of weakness, any sign that Daniel's composure was starting to crack. But there was nothing. Daniel stood like a statue, his eyes forward, his expression unchanged. But Jake wasn't discouraged. He had a plan. "Need a moment," he said to himself. "Something real, something they can't ignore." With a deep breath, Jake began to move. He stepped in front of Daniel, positioning himself so that the camera could catch both of them in the shot. He raised a water bottle, his fingers twisting the cap slowly, savoring the moment. And then, with a slight smirk on his face, Jake took a long, exaggerated drink, making sure the water droplets splashed out of the bottle in an almost theatrical display. The crowd watched, some confused, others sensing the building tension. Laura's voice shook as she whispered, "Jake, this isn't funny anymore. You need to stop." But it was too late. Jake was already too far in, caught up in the need for a reaction. He needed this moment to be real. He needed it to matter. And he was willing to do whatever it took to get it. The moment Jake took that exaggerated sip from his water bottle, he felt an adrenaline rush. He could feel the eyes of the tourists on him, some of them already filming, sensing that something out of the ordinary was about to unfold. The water splashed from his bottle as he tilted it back, droplets catching the sunlight, sparkling in the air before they fell to the courtyard stones. It was the kind of moment that in his mind would go viral, raw, unscripted, authentic. But as he looked up, he realized something that made his heart skip a beat. Daniel, the honor guard, was still standing completely still, as if the water hadn't even touched him. There was no reaction, no surprise, not even the slightest shift in his posture. It was as though Daniel was unbothered, unmoved, a living statue in the blazing heat. The air around him felt charged with an energy that made the tourists uncomfortable, but Daniel remained impenetrable. Jake's smile faltered. This was supposed to be his moment, the one that would get people talking, that would help him recapture the attention he desperately needed. But now, with Daniel's cold indifference, it seemed as though he was merely an obstacle, a living prop in Jake's viral quest. "Come on, man, just flinch already," Jake muttered to himself, his eyes narrowing. But Daniel didn't even budge. The scene around them had shifted. The playful energy from earlier had evaporated, replaced by a thick tension that filled the air. People were starting to sense that something wasn't right. They began pulling back, creating an invisible perimeter around Jake and Daniel. Laura, standing a few feet away, could feel the tension too. She watched Jake's eyes, now glued to the unmoving figure of Daniel. She could see it, the obsession, the desperation in his gaze. It was the same look he'd had in the past, when he'd done stunts like jumping into freezing lakes or eating ghost peppers live on camera. But this wasn't the same. This wasn't a stunt. This was something different, something darker. "Jake, please," she pleaded, her voice tinged with a mix of frustration and concern. "This is not you. Stop pushing it. Stop pushing him." But Jake didn't hear her. He was too deep in the moment, too consumed with the idea that this could be the moment that would bring him back into the spotlight. If only he could get a reaction out of Daniel, just a flinch, anything. People would eat it up, it would be everywhere. His career would bounce back, so he kept pushing, taking another step forward. The pressure inside him was building, and his every movement seemed to make the crowd draw closer, some of them recording, others whispering in hushed tones. The anticipation in the air was palpable. Jake wasn't just trying to capture a perfect shot anymore. He was trying to provoke something real. He shifted to the side, trying to get a better angle. He positioned himself just outside Daniel's peripheral vision and began pacing in front of him, creating a subtle, almost imperceptible pattern. His eyes stayed locked on Daniel, watching, waiting for a sign that the guard might crack. But there was nothing. Laura stepped forward, her voice now sharp with anger. "Jake, this isn't what you think. You're making him uncomfortable, and you're making everyone here uncomfortable. This isn't a joke anymore." Jake turned to her, but his eyes were fixed on Daniel. "You don't get it, Laura. I'm trying to make something that matters. People don't care about boring content anymore. They want the real stuff, the raw stuff." Laura shook her head, disbelieving. "No, Jake, you've lost sight of it. You're so focused on these stupid algorithms that you're forgetting what it means to be real. This is not what you used to be. This is not why we came here." But Jake, now more determined than ever, was too far gone. He barely heard her, his mind already calculating his next move. He couldn't back down. Not now. He watched Daniel, still unflinching, still unmoving. The water that had splashed on his uniform earlier hung there, evaporating under the heat, but it was as though the discomfort never reached Daniel. The honor guard was beyond it, beyond all of it. Jake knew that Daniel was trained to endure. He was a soldier first, a living testament to the discipline and resilience of the U.S. Army. But Jake also knew that everyone had a breaking point, didn't they? And so, Jake pushed forward. This time he reached for his water bottle again. He twisted the cap slowly, savoring the moment, and then he took a deliberate step closer to Daniel. He didn't care anymore. He had to see it. He had to provoke it. This was the only way to create something that people would remember. The crowd held its breath as Jake leaned in, acting as if he were about to take another drink. But then, with a sudden, almost calculated movement, he splashed the water on Daniel's face once more. The water splashed across Daniel's face, soaking his uniform and dripping down his ceremonial rifle. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The crowd, once buzzing with the light energy of sightseeing tourists, fell into stunned silence. Some faces were filled with shock, others with disbelief. But there was one thing that remained constant in the midst of the chaos. Daniel Evans didn't flinch. Jake stood there, phone still recording, expecting some kind of dramatic outburst. Maybe Daniel would break his composure, maybe he would snap and say something. But there was nothing. No angry words, no movement, not even a twitch of his hand. Daniel's gaze remained locked ahead, unwavering, like the stone statues that lined the mall, untouched by time or the relentless heat. Jake's heart raced, a sickening realization creeping in. This wasn't how he imagined it. This wasn't the reaction he had been hoping for. His mind, so focused on creating something viral, now struggled to process what was happening in front of him. It was as if his grand plan had fallen apart in an instant. He had pushed, provoked, and hoped for a real human response. But what he got instead was something far more unsettling. He got restraint. He got discipline. For a brief moment, Jake felt the sting of embarrassment. His phone, still recording, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his hand. The footage wasn't what he wanted. There was no viral moment. There was no reaction. His mind was spinning, trying to salvage something from the situation, but nothing was coming. Daniel remained still, a model of professionalism and poise, while Jake stood there, the perpetrator of the act, now realizing how out of his depth he was. But then, just as Jake thought the moment had passed, something shifted. It wasn't a change in Daniel's posture. It wasn't a shift in his expression. It was something more subtle, something that only those who truly understood the nature of military discipline could recognize. The air around them seemed to tighten, and Jake took an instinctive step back, the weight of his actions starting to sink in. Without breaking his stance, Daniel's eyes, previously fixed on the distance, now locked directly with Jake's. The intensity in those eyes hit Jake like a physical blow, making his chest tighten. For the first time, he felt like the one under scrutiny, not Daniel. The honor guard's gaze was calm, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. It was as if Daniel had assessed him in that moment, sized him up and found him wanting. A chill ran down Jake's spine as he realized just how far he had pushed the line. The crowd, which had been watching silently, began to shift. Some had started to film, their phones capturing the standoff, while others took a step back, sensing the tension that was now palpable. In the distance, Jake could hear the faint sound of security approaching, but it didn't matter. The energy in the courtyard had changed. The joke, the prank, the moment he thought would be a laughable viral sensation, had now become something far more serious. Then, Daniel moved. It wasn't a sudden outburst or a dramatic display of anger. It was a perfect quarter turn, executed, with such precision that it looked almost mechanical. The movement was calculated, the kind of motion that came from years of training, years of discipline. Jake's breath caught in his throat as Daniel's white-gloved hand shot out, seizing the water bottle from his grasp with a speed that caught him completely off guard. "What the hell?" Jake started to protest, his voice faltering as Daniel raised the bottle to eye level, inspecting it with a cool, detached gaze. There was no anger in Daniel's eyes, no malice, just the focused attention of someone who knew exactly what was happening and wasn't about to be part of it. With a deliberate, almost methodical motion, Daniel poured a small amount of water into his palm, wiping his face slowly, as if cleaning away the intrusion with the same precision he applied to his duties. His movements were calm, deliberate, and filled with an unsettling power that only made Jake more uncomfortable. Daniel's posture remained perfect, unbroken, despite the heat, the sweat, and the clear discomfort. Jake, his phone still recording, was at a loss. His smirk faltered as he took another step back, realizing that he was the one who had made a fool of himself, not Daniel. The honor guard hadn't been broken by the prank. He hadn't been rattled. In fact, the more Jake watched, the more he realized that Daniel's restraint was not a limitation. It was a choice. A deliberate, controlled choice. As if to punctuate the moment, Daniel held the water bottle at shoulder height and crushed it with a smooth, almost effortless motion. The plastic crumpled with a loud crack, a sound that echoed across the courtyard. The water inside spilled out, splashing onto the stones at Daniel's feet. It was a clear, undeniable signal that Daniel had regained control, and with it he sent a message Jake would never forget. "You've crossed a line." Daniel's voice, calm and unwavering, cut through the silence. "This is a military installation, not your stage." The crowd around them was completely still, each person sensing the gravity of the moment. Security, now fully aware of the situation, was closing in. But it didn't matter anymore. Daniel had made his point without raising his voice, without breaking his composure. He had shown Jake what true strength looked like, not in reaction, but in control. Jake stood frozen, the reality of what he had done crashing over him. His phone, still recording, captured every second of the humiliation, but he didn't care about that now. He cared about the overwhelming sense of failure, the crushing weight of his own actions. The consequences were coming, and Jake knew, deep down, that there was no turning back. The tension in the air was thick now, and Jake felt it in his chest. He had pushed too far, and in that single, chilling moment, he realized he had underestimated Daniel. The honor guard wasn't just a soldier performing his duty. He was a man who had mastered the art of restraint, of self-control. And now, with his cool, composed demeanor, Daniel had turned the tables on Jake. What was supposed to be a moment, a viral fame, had transformed into a quiet, intense confrontation. Jake's heart was pounding in his ears as he stood there, watching Daniel crush the water bottle with mechanical precision. The sound echoed in the still air, and Jake's eyes darted from Daniel's unbroken gaze to the crowd around them. The tourists who had once been laughing and taking photos were now silent. They could sense the shift. The light-hearted atmosphere had dissolved, replaced by something heavier, more serious. The crowd had instinctively pulled back, their curiosity turning to apprehension. It was as though the space around them had contracted, and Jake was left feeling exposed, vulnerable. His phone, still recording, felt heavier in his hand with each passing second. The footage he had hoped to capture, the moment he thought would set the internet on fire, had already started to fade into something much darker. Daniel's calm voice cut through the silence, firm and unwavering. "You've crossed a line," he said, his words carrying the weight of authority. "This is a military installation, not a stage for your amusement." Jake's breath hitched, the impact of those words sinking in. It wasn't just about the water or the prank that he had planned to get views. It was about something much more profound: respect. Respect for the guard, respect for the tradition, respect for the uniform. And most importantly, it was about understanding the consequences of his actions. Jake's mind raced, but his body was frozen. He glanced around, his eyes scanning the faces of the tourists who had been watching. Some were still filming, but most had turned away, uncomfortable with what had just unfolded. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't the center of attention anymore. The focus had shifted to Daniel, and rightfully so. The security officers had arrived. Two men, dressed in dark uniforms, approached slowly but purposefully. Their presence was a silent acknowledgement that the situation had escalated beyond what anyone had expected. Jake could feel the weight of their gaze as they flanked him, their movements synchronized, efficient. They weren't just coming to intervene, they were coming to restore order, to ensure that what had just happened didn't spiral further. A part of Jake still wanted to argue, to defend himself, to convince himself that this was all part of the game. "It's just water," he muttered under his breath, his voice lacking the conviction he once had. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they sounded hollow, meaningless. Daniel, still standing at attention, didn't flinch. His posture was unwavering, his expression set in stoic determination. He was a soldier, after all, trained to maintain control in the face of adversity. Jake had tried to break that control, but all he had succeeded in doing was exposing his own desperation. The second security officer moved closer, his tone neutral but firm. "We're going to need your identification," he said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of authority. Jake hesitated, his mind still reeling, but he knew there was no point in arguing. The damage had been done. He fumbled in his pockets, pulling out his wallet with shaky hands. The phone, still recording, felt like it was burning a hole in his palm. The footage of his failed attempt to provoke a reaction from Daniel was now his own personal humiliation, one that would haunt him long after the video was uploaded. As the security officers took his information and began to ask questions, Jake felt the sting of his actions more deeply than ever before. This wasn't just about losing a sponsorship deal, or even about the viral video. This was about the profound lesson he had just learned, the hard way, that respect for others and for tradition was more important than any moment of fleeting fame. And then, just as everything seemed to settle into its final rhythm, Jake noticed Laura standing at the edge of the crowd. She had been watching the entire ordeal, her face a mix of disappointment and sadness. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest as she looked at him, and for the first time Jake realized that the distance between them had grown. She had been right all along. This wasn't what their trip was supposed to be about. It wasn't about him or his career. It was about them, about enjoying the moment together. Laura stepped forward, her gaze never leaving Jake's. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The look on her face said everything. Slowly, she slipped the engagement ring from her finger and placed it on a nearby stone ledge, visible but subtle. The message was clear. Some things, once crossed, could never be undone. As she turned and walked away, Jake felt the weight of everything he had lost. The career he had once built on reckless stunts, the relationship that had slowly crumbled. Under the pressure of his obsession, now all of it seemed meaningless. He was left standing in the middle of the courtyard, the sound of his phone recording still echoing in his ears. The security officers led him away, their silence louder than any words they could have said. And as Jake was escorted out, the one thing he couldn't escape was the quiet realization that, in the end, the consequences of his actions would be far greater than any viral video could ever be. We want to hear from you. What do you think about what happened today? Have you ever been in a situation where you pushed boundaries just to get attention, only to realize the consequences too late? This story isn't just about a viral moment gone wrong. It's about respect, discipline, and understanding the deeper meaning behind the roles we play in our lives. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Jake crossed the line, or was he just trying to create something memorable? How do you feel about the way Daniel handled the situation? His restraint, his calm in the face of provocation. Have you ever witnessed something like this before, where someone's actions change the entire course of an experience or relationship? Drop a comment below and share your perspective with us. Let's talk about the importance of respecting others and understanding the impact of our actions, both online and offline. And don't forget to share your own experiences. Let's start a conversation. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next powerful tale. We can't wait to read your thoughts and continue this discussion with you.